Welcome to the Cold Case Project. Tonight, we journey back over 4 decades to November of 1980, to a case that remains a chilling enigma. It's the story of a working man who simply vanished, leaving behind a stolen cargo, a bewildered family, and a mystery that has endured for more than 40 years. This is the cold case of Stanley Craig Galbraith, known to his loved ones as Stan. In November of 1980, Stanley Craig Galbraith, a then 37-year-old man, left his home in Winfield, Kansas, for what should have been a routine day at work. Stan was 37 years old at the time of his disappearance, but if he were alive today, he would be 80 years old. This November will mark 44 agonizing years that his family has been without answers, without knowing what truly happened to him. At the time of his vanishing, Stan was described as 5 feet 9 inches tall, weighing 160 pounds, with black hair and striking blue eyes. He also sported a short black beard and had stitches in his head. Furthermore, he had a distinctive tattoo of a name on his upper right arm. Stan was employed as a driver for Prairieland Processors, a meat processing plant located right there in Winfield. His vehicle was an 18-foot refrigerated meat truck, and on that fateful day, his destination was Hutchinson, Kansas. Stan made his scheduled stops and deliveries, first in Wichita and then at the Valley Center High School. However, he never completed his journey. He never arrived in Hutchinson as planned. The last confirmed sightings of Stan's truck that day painted a concerning picture. Witnesses reported seeing Galbraith's truck driving erratically, even sideswiping parked cars. This unusual behavior immediately suggested something was amiss. The very next day, the truck was found abandoned in a parking lot in Wichita, Kansas. There was no sign of Stan Galbraith at the scene. He was gone. However, inside the cab of the truck, investigators found his personal effects, his sunglasses, and his baseball cap. More disturbingly, some of his blood was also discovered within the vehicle. This was no ordinary abandonment. The cargo of the truck also told a significant part of the story. A staggering 250 boxes containing 15,000 pounds of processed beef were missing. In 1980, this amount of meat was valued at over $20,000, a substantial sum, particularly for that era. The immediate conclusion drawn by authorities was that Stan Galbraith had been murdered. The motive, they believed, was the theft of this valuable cargo. Tragically, despite this strong presumption, his body has never been found. In 1985, 5 years after his disappearance, Stan Galbraith was legally declared deceased. This legal declaration, while offering some administrative closure, provides little comfort to a family still desperate for real answers. Police investigating his presumed homicide firmly believe that Stan was killed specifically so someone could steal the meat, suggesting he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Furthermore, investigators believe that more than one person was involved in this crime, indicating a coordinated effort. Stan Galbraith was a beloved member of his community. He was a proud graduate of Winfield High School, where he had played football. He was well known and well loved in the area. When he vanished, he left behind a wife and children who have lived for over 4 decades without knowing his fate or being able to give him a proper burial. His case remains officially unsolved, a persistent ache for his family and a blot on the community's history.
Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
Paula Godfrey, a young woman brimming with ambition, was reportedly hired by John Edward Robinson Sr. in 1984 in Overland Park, Kansas. Paula, keenly interested in pursuing a business career, excitedly informed her family that Robinson had arranged for her and a group of other women to fly to San Antonio, Texas, to enroll in what she believed was a valuable clerical skills course. Paula genuinely believed she had secured a position as a sales representative for Robinson's Kansas-based management consulting firm, known as Equi2. Her family members vividly recalled the day she vanished. On September 1st, 1984, Robinson himself picked Paula up at their Overland Park residence, stating he would drive her to the airport for her supposed flight to San Antonio. Paula Godfrey has never been heard from again. Several days passed, and when Paula failed to make contact with anyone, her father, consumed with worry, took matters into his own hands. He traveled to San Antonio to search for her. His search quickly revealed a chilling truth. Paula had never checked into her motel on September 1st. Returning to Overland Park, her father located Robinson at the Equi2 offices and, filled with desperate urgency, demanded that Robinson ensure Paula contact her parents within 3 days. Days later, Godfrey's family received a note. It was postmarked from Kansas City, Kansas, and supposedly written by their daughter. They immediately forwarded it to the police department. The letter was notable for several reasons. It was typed, and, critically, it contained numerous grammatical and typewritten errors. Paula's loved ones were insistent that these mistakes were uncharacteristic of her skills and attention to detail. The letter stated that Paula planned to start over and leave the Overland Park area, claiming she didn't know where she would eventually settle down. It also included a strange detail. She thanked Robinson in the letter and assured her family she was fine. Both her family and authorities quickly concluded that the note was a blatant forgery, a manipulative attempt to dissuade investigators from pursuing Paula's missing persons case any further. As the years passed, John Edward Robinson Sr.'s predatory pattern began to unravel. In 1985, another woman, Lisa Stasi, vanished from Overland Park, this time with her infant daughter, Tiffany, after associating with Robinson. Lisa has never been located, but investigators made a shocking discovery. Tiffany had been illegally adopted by Robinson's brother and sister-in-law in 1985. Authorities determined that Robinson had been using Equi2 not as a legitimate business, but as a front for a black market baby brokering operation. They strongly believe he murdered Lisa Stasi to secure Tiffany's placement and prevent any complications. Robinson's illegal activities and disturbing pattern continued well into the 1990s. After being released from a previous prison sentence, he began a new spree of assaulting women he met online. The full horror of his crimes would eventually come to light when his name became linked to a Kansas storage facility. Inside this facility, barrels containing the remains of 5 women were discovered. This grotesque finding immediately triggered a reopening of the investigation into Paula Godfrey's disappearance, linking her potential fate to this horrific discovery. Robinson is also strongly suspected in the 1987 disappearance of Catherine Clampett, another one of his former employees, highlighting a terrifying pattern. Further chilling details emerged in 2000, when one of Robinson's former associates came forward. This associate told authorities that Robinson had paid him a substantial sum of $50,000 during the mid-1980s to recruit women for an escort service in Kansas. The associate claimed to have been a friend of Paula Godfrey's and admitted that he was the one who had convinced her to contact Robinson, though he maintained that Paula most likely did not know Robinson's true, nefarious motives at the time. Overcome with guilt, the associate stated that he blamed himself for Paula Godfrey's disappearance. Justice, though delayed, eventually caught up with John Edward Robinson Sr. in late October 2002. He was convicted of Lisa Stasi's murder and the murders of 2 additional women in Kansas. A jury recommended that he receive the death penalty for the homicides of the other women and a life sentence for Lisa's murder. While these convictions brought some measure of justice for those victims, Paula Godfrey's specific case still remains unsolved in terms of a direct conviction for her death. Before her disappearance in 1984, Paula Godfrey was an accomplished amateur figure skater, a testament to her dedication and talent. She was a 1983 graduate of Olathe North High School, with a promising future ahead of her. Yet, despite decades of investigation and the exposure of John Edward Robinson Sr. as a serial killer, Paula Godfrey's remains have never been located. Her family continues to live with the agonizing uncertainty of not being able to lay her to rest. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Paula Godfrey or any details that could lead to the discovery of her remains, please contact the authorities. Zeta Gordon was last seen leaving her family's residence in Atchison County, Kansas, at approximately 2 a.m. on October 5, 1992. Her departure followed an argument with her husband, Wayne Gordon. As she left, she told him she simply needed to take a drive to cool off. From that moment on, Zeta was never heard from again. She left behind 3 children, ranging in age from 9 to 23 years old. Tragically, one of her children witnessed her leaving the house in the early hours of that morning. It was uncharacteristic of Zeta to simply leave without warning, especially given her strong bond with her children and her elderly mother. The following day, 2 of Zeta's children made a distressing discovery. Her white Chrysler LeBaron convertible was found parked in a lot near an abandoned farmhouse in Atchison County. The scene itself was perplexing. The convertible top was down, the keys were still in the ignition, and the radio was turned on, suggesting an abrupt, unplanned departure. However, there was no sign of Zeta herself at the scene. It was immediately after finding her car, and with a growing unease, that her children officially reported Zeta missing to the authorities. In the weeks that followed her disappearance, approximately 10 possible sightings of Zeta were reported in the local area. Some of these reports came from individuals who claimed to know Zeta, adding a layer of tantalizing but unconfirmed hope. However, despite the various claims, none of these sightings could ever be officially confirmed by investigators, leaving her whereabouts just as unknown. Adding another layer of complexity to the narrative, Wayne Gordon, Zeta's husband, who was a dentist and the son of a former Kansas state senator, filed for divorce from Zeta in January 1994, little over a year after her disappearance. He later remarried in 1997. Then, in January 1998, at the age of 48, Wayne Gordon committed suicide by hanging himself at a Boy Scout camp where he had frequently volunteered. He left no note, no explanation, no indication as to his motive for taking his own life. While police never officially named Wayne as a suspect in Zeta's disappearance, his sudden and tragic death, combined with the circumstances of Zeta's vanishing after an argument with him, fueled many rumors about his possible involvement within the local community. He was, and remains, considered a person of interest in her case, his silence now permanently sealed by his death. At the time of her disappearance, Zeta was actively pursuing her passion, studying interior design. Authorities, having investigated the circumstances, firmly believe that Zeta Gordon was the victim of a homicide. Angela Green was last seen at her home in the 7600 block of Tomahawk Road in Prairie Village, Kansas, on June 20th, 2019. Her daughter, Ellie Green, a student at the University of Kansas, had just returned home from studying abroad in Italy. What should have been a joyful reunion quickly turned into an argument between Angela and Ellie. Angela, for reasons unknown, asked Ellie to leave the house. Ellie, taken aback, complied and went to stay with her boyfriend's family. She later stated that their argument wasn't a serious one, though it was entirely uncharacteristic for her mother to ever ask her to leave the house. Ellie didn't hear from her mother for 3 days following the argument. Then, her father, Jeffrey, sent Ellie a text message. The message was startling. Angela, he claimed, had experienced a mental health crisis, and he had had her committed to a psychiatric hospital. This threat to commit Angela had been made by Jeffrey in the past, but he had never actually followed through with it until now. He provided no specifics about the hospital's location, Angela's diagnosis, or her prognosis. His only details were that the hospital was down south and that Angela would remain there until she gets better. When Ellie's boyfriend's mother, sensing the gravity of the situation, asked if she could visit Angela, Jeffrey ignored her request entirely. This is what we can call story number 1 from Jeffrey. Angela is in a mental health facility. 3 weeks later, on the evening of July 16th, Ellie asked to meet with her father to discuss her mother. They met at the home of Ellie's boyfriend's family, the Krauses. It was then that Jeffrey delivered a shocking second story. Angela, he announced, had died of a stroke while she was in the hospital. He offered very few details about the death and, perhaps most disturbingly, asked everyone present not to inform Angela's side of the family, who all reside in New York. Months passed. No funeral service was held for Angela. No obituary was published. And, true to Jeffrey's request, no one informed Angela's family of her supposed passing. The silence was deafening, and the lack of closure began to gnaw at Ellie. Finally, in February 2020, 8 months after her mother was last seen, Ellie broke her silence and confided in her maternal aunt, Catherine Gore. Her aunt, naturally, was horrified and immediately asked for a copy of Angela's death certificate. Jeffrey told Ellie he had a copy at home and would text her a photo of it. He never did. Determined, Ellie traveled to Topeka, Kansas, and went to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment to request a copy herself. Their search, even a nationwide one, yielded no proof of Angela's death. The only document they could locate related to Angela and Jeffrey was their marriage certificate. With growing alarm, Angela's sister then contacted the police to request a welfare check on Angela. When officers arrived at the Greens' house, Jeffrey presented yet another contradictory story. He claimed his wife was alive and well, asserting that she had run away with a friend. He offered no details about this friend or the vehicle they supposedly left in. It was at this point, faced with her father's constantly changing narratives and the authorities' inability to locate her mother, that Ellie Green finally filed a missing persons report with the police. The circumstances surrounding Angela's disappearance are highly suspicious. She left behind her purse, her phone, her passport, her driver's license, and her car at home. Furthermore, no money had been withdrawn from her bank account since she was last seen. According to Ellie, her mother was not the type to use a credit or debit card for purchases on her own. She rarely went shopping by herself, and hardly ever left the house without either her husband or daughter accompanying her. Angela was a devoted stay-at-home mother, and Ellie, her only child, was undeniably the focal point of her life. This behavior is entirely inconsistent with someone who would suddenly and willingly leave their life behind. As the police investigation intensified, Jeffrey Green hired a lawyer and has since refused to speak further to law enforcement or the media about Angela's case. Ellie has stated that he has provided no further information to her regarding Angela's whereabouts either. While police are not certain what happened to Angela Green, they strongly believe she is endangered. Her case remains unsolved, a haunting mystery driven by conflicting stories and a daughter's unwavering quest for the truth. This case unfolds in Prairie Village, Kansas, a city in Johnson County, part of the Kansas City metropolitan area, with a population of just over 21,000 as of the 2010 census. It's not the largest city, which could potentially impact the volume of tips received. The address, 7600 block of Tomahawk Road, appears to be a fairly typical residential neighborhood. There's a Methodist church and a temple nearby, along with a couple of bus stops, which might have had some security cameras. However, a significant challenge for investigators is the delay in reporting Angela missing. The missing person investigation didn't officially begin until February 2020, a full 8 months after she was last seen. Any security footage from June 2019, if it existed, would likely be either extremely difficult to obtain or would have already been overwritten. This forces the investigation to rely heavily on human memory and the potential for crucial social information. Ellie Green, barely out of high school, found herself in an unimaginable position. Graduating in 2018, spending a year at college, then a month studying abroad in Italy. She returned home to an argument with her mother and then a series of increasingly bizarre and contradictory stories from her father. The two people she trusted most in the world, one vanished, and the other seemingly became dishonest. This is an incredibly tough position for someone as young as 19 to navigate, especially while also managing her academics and attempting to launch a full-blown effort to raise exposure for her mother's case. Ellie has been interviewed countless times, doing everything she can to get answers. Ellie has provided some insights into her family dynamics. Her parents, she said, argued at times but never violently. Her father, Jeffrey, of Russian heritage, worked in information technology at the federal courthouse. Her mother, born Shin Hee, was the second daughter of college professors outside Beijing. She moved to the U.S. in 1998 when she married Jeffrey, a 90-day fiancé scenario, as some might call it, implying a rapid marriage to maintain status, though their union lasted 20 years. Ellie was born 2 years later. In 2018, her parents watched as Ellie, a talented pianist who spoke Spanish, Russian, and fluent Mandarin, graduated with highest honors from Shawnee Mission East High School. Ellie describes her mother as someone for whom she was basically her life. Her mother dedicated herself to ensuring Ellie excelled in school and had the best possible upbringing, preparing her for a wonderful life of her own. Ellie has pondered if her mother's potential depression or bipolar disorder, combined with Ellie going off to college and then her trip to Italy, might have contributed to the emotional landscape of their last argument. Angela had apparently lashed out at Ellie, telling her she needed to be more productive, even grabbing some of Ellie's belongings and telling her to leave. This was particularly strange, given Ellie had already lined up a summer job at a local children's science museum. This intense focus on Ellie, now no longer living at home, perhaps created an unexpected stressor for Angela. It also raises a question. Could things have been deteriorating in the marriage while Ellie was away? And Angela, knowing Ellie would be returning, didn't want her to witness the turmoil? Ellie recounted the chilling text message from her father 3 days after she left. He claimed to have tricked her mother into going to a grocery store parking lot where, he said, mental health workers forcibly grabbed her and took her away. This specific detail raises immediate red flags. It's difficult to imagine a mental health institution executing such a high-risk public capture. Such an action could endanger not only the individual being committed but also surrounding citizens. A more typical process might involve subtle coercion to get the person to the facility, not a public struggle. When Ellie pressed her father on how Angela was taken, Jeffrey replied, "We met the mental health people in the store parking lot, and it was a struggle. Better than trying to pry her out of the house, and she always looks good going out, so she did not have the embarrassment of house clothes or untidy house." These justifications are incredibly weak and make little sense. Ellie repeatedly asked her father where her mother was placed, but he refused to provide any specifics beyond down south somewhere. He told her he didn't want her to visit until Angela was doing better, a seemingly reasonable request to a dutiful daughter. He also instructed her not to alert Angela's extended family. Then, 3.5 weeks later, on July 16, 2019, Jeffrey asked to see Ellie in person, stating it was important. He arrived at the Krauses' home late at night and simply stated, Angela died of a stroke. Ellie recalled the world going blurry, falling to her knees in the driveway, unable to even cry. Jeffrey, after delivering this devastating news, simply left. The next day, the Krauses, incredibly compassionate, invited Jeffrey to their home so he wouldn't be alone, assuming he was a grieving widower. They noted he seemed quiet, his eyes downcast. Sarah Kraus, Ellie's boyfriend's mother, asked about a funeral or memorial. Jeffrey replied, "No." She offered to pen an obituary, but he never followed up, and none was written. Ellie asked if an autopsy would be performed. He didn't answer. She knew her mother wanted her ashes sent back to China, a cultural tradition. Yet, Jeffrey again requested she tell nothing to her mother's side of the family about her death. Every time Ellie brought up a memorial or funeral arrangements, he consistently put her off. Ellie explained that she asked questions every single weekend, or whenever I went over there or saw him. I would ask questions, but he would not answer anything about Mom. Imagine being 19 years old and having the very foundations of your world shattered. The one person you still have, your father, seems to be lying to you. Ellie's anguish is palpable. After months of this unsettling dynamic, Ellie finally broke her promise to her father and spoke to her maternal aunt, Catherine Gore. She choked out the words, "My mom has died." Her aunt, naturally, assumed it had just happened. No, Ellie told her this happened back in July. The family was shocked. This conversation prompted them to ask for the death certificate, an entirely reasonable request given Angela had supposedly died 8 months prior with no trace. Ellie, skipping classes, traveled to Topeka to request it, only to find no record of Angela's death. Not even a nationwide search could locate one. Confronting her father, Ellie asked, "Where did Mom die?" He replied, "Kansas." When Ellie countered, "No, she didn't," having just been at Topeka, he claimed he needed to go home and look up the location. His inability to recall the state where his wife of 20 years supposedly died was a definitive sign for Ellie. "I was like, okay, he's lying," she said. She then asked about her mother's ashes, to which he replied, "At home." When she pressed for the hospital and doctor, he literally stared into space. It was then that Ellie filed the missing persons report, finally getting investigators involved. After police became involved, Ellie said her father's story changed yet again. His wife had possibly run off with a friend, even saying she was out partying. This completely contradicted the image of Angela as a homebody who didn't smoke, drink, or party, and rarely left the house alone. Neighbors painted a consistent picture of Angela. She wasn't the type to have a close group of friends, but she was social with neighbors, bringing them flowers or baked goods, talking about their kids and schools. "She was such a sweet lady," said next-door neighbor Nicole Walton. Walton noted that Jeffrey was less open than Angela, and others found it easiest to connect with him about his passion for vintage cars. Ellie described her father as mellow and the more patient parent. Jeffrey retired from his job at the courthouse in December 2019, 6 months after Angela disappeared. It's unclear if this was planned or a direct consequence of the situation. Neighbors like Stephen Harvell noted Angela's absence in the summer of 2019, initially assuming she might have gone to China. When they learned of the stroke story from Ellie, they sensed something was amiss. Harvell emphasized she's not the kind of person who would take off with somebody else. Angela did not do a lot of things on her own. When police finally showed up at the Green home, Harvell observed them going in through the garage with Jeffrey, staying a long while, then emerging, talking amongst themselves before re-entering for another hour. Captain Ivan Washington of the Prairie Village Police Department stated, "We're looking for help from the community." He admitted he hadn't come across a case like this in his 19 years with the department. Retired FBI Special Agent Michael Tapman commented, "The first thought is it's highly suspicious." However, he also noted the difficulty. 8 months later, people aren't going to remember, "Did I see her on this day or that day?" They are not going to remember little things that she said that might have been important, but they have forgotten about 8 months late. This case is unique in its strong indications of a particular direction, yet remains stuck in the missing person phase due to a lack of concrete, physical evidence. Ellie's relationship with both her parents has been in limbo, asking her father monthly about her mother, only to receive the unsettling, circular response, "Have you heard from Mom?" And then, "Well, if she were dead, I would not hear from her. Is that correct?" To which he replies, "Yes, you can think of it that way." This kind of evasive, almost mocking language is agonizing for a daughter desperate for answers. While the physical evidence may be scarce, the social information and community observations become incredibly vital. The hope remains that someone in the neighborhood, or someone who has heard the changing stories, will come forward with the critical piece of information needed to move this case forward and finally bring Angela Green home. Her family, especially Ellie, deserves the truth. Tonight, we delve into a puzzling disappearance from rural Kansas, a case marked by familial animosity, a missing body, and 2 trials that ended without definitive answers. This is the enduring mystery of Michael Golib. Michael Golib was last seen in Stanton County, Kansas, at approximately 6 p.m. on May 20th, 2003. He had just completed his workday at Kramer Harvesting, a custom harvest operation. His plans for that evening were clear. He was supposed to pick up his 5-year-old son from the home of his ex-girlfriend, Shannon Albers Floyd. However, Michael never arrived at her residence. From that moment on, he was never seen or heard from again. At the time of his disappearance, Michael left behind not only his young son, but also a fiancée, with whom he shared an infant son. It was profoundly out of character for Michael to depart without any warning, particularly given his responsibilities as a father to 2 young children. 2 days after Michael's disappearance, his gold and brown Chevrolet S10 pickup truck was discovered abandoned on a remote county road in northwest Grant County, Kansas. The truck, distinctive with its toolboxes and Trego County, Kansas license plates, showed no immediate signs of forced entry or struggle. With the discovery of his abandoned vehicle, authorities quickly shifted their investigation into Michael's disappearance, elevating it to that of a potential homicide. The circumstances surrounding the truck's location on a remote road, combined with Michael's uncharacteristic silence, pointed strongly towards foul play. More than 3 years after Michael vanished, a significant break occurred in June 2006. Shannon Albers Floyd, Michael's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his eldest son, along with her husband, Chad Floyd, were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder in connection with Michael Golib's case. Authorities publicly stated their belief that Michael had gone to the Floyds' home on the night of his disappearance and was shot to death there. A deep-seated animosity existed between Shannon and Michael. Their relationship was reportedly fraught with frequent disagreements, particularly concerning child support payments and visitation arrangements for their son. These disputes were well known to those around them. A key piece of information that emerged during the investigation was the Floyds' desire to relocate to Montana. However, this move was reportedly impeded because Michael had filed for custody of their son. This custody battle created significant friction and potential motive. Chad Floyd, who came from a seemingly wealthy family, had even confided in friends that he planned to offer Michael a substantial sum, $50,000, to persuade him to drop his custody suit. Following Michael's disappearance, investigators made a crucial discovery. Michael Golib's blood was found on the Floyds' front porch, having seeped and dripped between the wooden planks. Adding to the suspicious circumstances, it was also revealed that the couple had purchased a gun on the very day Michael went missing. Despite these compelling pieces of evidence and the charges brought against them, the Floyds' defense attorney argued that there was insufficient proof that Michael Golib was actually deceased. The defense put forth alternative theories, speculating that Michael might have committed suicide or perhaps left of his own accord to escape his life. Another theory presented was that his alleged role as an informant in a local drug case could have led to his disappearance, suggesting he might have been targeted by others. The couple's trial commenced in July 2007. After deliberations, the jury was ultimately unable to reach a unanimous verdict, resulting in a mistrial. A second trial was conducted in April 2008, but the outcome was the same. The jury was again unable to reach a verdict, leaving the case in a state of limbo. In November 2008, a judge dismissed all charges against Shannon and Chad Floyd. This dismissal was made without prejudice, a critical legal distinction meaning that prosecutors retain the option to refile charges at a later date should new evidence surface that significantly strengthens their case. This leaves the door open for future prosecution if a break in the case occurs. Michael Golib was originally from California, having moved to Kansas as a teenager. He never graduated high school, but supported himself by performing various odd jobs in the area, sometimes working as an auto mechanic. His employers at Kramer Custom Harvest spoke highly of him, describing him as a good and reliable employee. Despite all the legal proceedings and the suspicions surrounding his ex-girlfriend and her husband, Michael Golib's body has never been found. Foul play is overwhelmingly suspected in his case, driven by the unique and troubling circumstances surrounding his vanishing and the evidence of conflict with the last known people to see him alive. The questions surrounding Michael's fate and the location of his remains continue to haunt those who knew him.